Welcome back. Fantastic opening out at Yorkhurst, and I presume the fantastic opening in town at the Innovation Precinct. Right, perhaps we can turn to item 22, Christchurch Town Hall Conservation Project Strategic Business Case, and I would like to move the staff recommendation. And do I have a seconder? Glenn Livingston has seconded that motion. Have we got any questions that councillors would like to ask of staff, or would staff like to begin with a presentation?
We would, Madam
You would like to start with a presentation.
We'd like
perhaps
to introduce the paper.
if I'd sort of bothered to look down the end of the table first, then perhaps I would have noted that. So please.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Thank you, councillors. On the 29th of August 2013, Council resolved to commence the design development of the Town Hall restoration project with the intention to achieve further cost certainty through a tender process. They also resolved to separate the budget, allocating £127.5 million for the Town Hall restoration. I'm very pleased and relieved to advise Council that the tenders have been received, and it provides the desired confidence and cost certainty that the Town Hall restoration can be delivered within the allocated budget. Furthermore, we've also undertaken a business case which shows the need for a mix of facilities and identifies a number of options, and Peter will lead us through that strategic and economic business case.
Great. Thank you, Liam. So what I want to do is speak you through the strategic and economic business case, and this is to supports an investment decision in civic, cultural and performing arts venues for Christchurch. It's primarily a business case to guide investment in venues that the city needs if it's serious about becoming a world-class livable city. But I think it's worth just looking at the strategic context that the civic, cultural and performing arts sectors are currently operating in. Prior to the earthquakes, Christchurch was a vibrant, dynamic, prosperous and activated city. Cantabrians had and still have a distinctive character, and the city had a unique identity. Earthquakes changed all that, but through Share an Idea, the Central City Recovery Plan, the long-term plan, Cantabrians have clearly articulated they want a return to a world-class livable city. Cantabrians want a city that is vibrant, prosperous and reactivated, a city that reflects the distinctive and new character of Cantabrians, and a city that delivers a new and unique identity. And this is reflected in Council's community outcomes for Christchurch. It's an exciting time in Christchurch, and particularly in the process of rebuilding Christchurch as a livable world-class city. But it's now time to acknowledge the role that the cultural and performing arts sectors have played and continue to play in getting the city back on its feet, and in their ability to catalyse the recovery through contributing to community and cultural well-being, drawing people back into the central city and supporting local tourism and hospitality. But the performing arts sector can only do this if the right responding to concerns expressed by the local community, the Ministry of Culture and Heritage commissioned an independent study of existing and planned venues in Christchurch. You can see up there, the key output of this study was the optimum facilities matrix, which describes the agreed list of well-appointed venues that a city the size of Christchurch would ideally have to successfully deliver the needs of civic, cultural and performing arts sector and its audience. This matrix forms the basis of the blueprint and also the starting point for the strategic and economic business case. You can see on the matrix that highlighted in yellow, there are 4 blank spaces. The top one is a large auditorium suitable for civic events, festivals, large-scale performances, around about 2,000 plus seats. The next one is a mid-sized theatre, around about 600 seats, auditorium, acoustically suitable for traditional, symphonic and chamber music. Third item is a 500 to 600 seated or 1,000 person standing flexible mid-sized venue for contemporary music, jazz, folk, rock and performance. The fourth one is a dance space, a theatre black box, and that has been earmarked in terms of either the YMCA, the Metro Sports, or potentially in the Performing Arts Precinct going forward. So what I want to do is focus on the 2,000-seat auditorium, the mid-sized auditorium for classic music, and the mid-sized flat-floor contemporary music venue. We engaged Deloitte to carry out a strategic assessment of the options for delivering these facilities. And from an initial long list, a short list of options were identified and carried forward for more detailed evaluation. First option, clearly, was we don't do anything. We demolish the town hall, we walk away, and we leave the performing arts sector to continue on in the temporary venues that they're currently operating in. If we do that, it'll cost us $12 million. Spent $7 million to date, stripping out, preparing, protecting the existing building. Add another $5 million to demolish it. And we don't achieve any of the objectives of a livable city that's vibrant, activated, and has a unique identity. The second option was to build a new 1,500-seat auditorium and a 600-seat theatre on a new site. And I've referred to this as the blueprint option. This was what was originally included in the blueprint that was produced for Canterbury. The estimated cost of that is $193.5 million plus site costs. In the paper that councillors have in front of them on attachment 3, page 187, there's a range of benchmark costs from recent auditoria completed in and conference halls and concert halls completed in the United Kingdom and Europe. The average cost per seat of those benchmark facilities is $142,000 a seat. But that does include the Disney facility and the Copenhagen Opera House, which are both spectacular venues and eye-wateringly expensive. We get a more meaningful comparison if we look at the Bridgewater Concert Hall in Manchester, the Sage in Gateshead, and the House of Music in Denmark. Those are all round about $93,000 a seat and are consistent with the acoustically sophisticated auditoria that were described in the blueprint. And that is what underpins the estimated cost of $193.5 million. The option was to repair the Town Hall auditorium in the foyer only at an estimated cost of $91 million. That would see us demolishing the James Hay Theatre, the limes and boaters and the kitchen facilities, and providing a landscaped area in replacement of those facilities. The next option was to repair the Town Hall auditorium, foyer and James Hay at an estimated cost of $109 million. That provides the facilities that the venue's matrix achieves, but loses burning facilities that currently exist. And as Maurice Marnie pointed out yesterday, we also lose some of those valuable spaces around the perimeter of the town hall that are used for major events like the Big Sing. The final option was full repair and restoration of the town hall and James Hay at an estimated cost of $127.6 million. There's insurance implications.
I'm sorry, and I know that I shouldn't interrupt, but can you just go back to that previous slide?
Sure.
And just tell me, how much did the cost-sharing agreement allocate for the blueprint option?
Okay, the blueprint, the cost-sharing agreement for the Performing Arts Precinct was $150 million. That was to cover both the 1,500-seat auditorium, the 600-seat small auditorium, plus the court theatre, plus the CSO and any other venues in the performing arts precinct.
But you're saying on a benchmark basis, 193.5 million would have been required to build the 1,500-seat auditorium and a 600-seat theatre alone.
That's correct.
So where did the $150 million come from in the cost-sharing agreement?
I'm not the right person to ask for that.
So who?
If I may just mention, the performing arts precinct in the cost share schedule 10 has to be confirmed against a number of numbers. I think when you go to the actual schedule, there was some discussions in schedule 10 which refer to that, which talks around options for the precinct. There was 3 options around the town hall, and that was what the last council made the decision on.
Yeah, but there's no numbers attached to it. So I thought it was 157 million but I can't find.
I believe it's 158 million, yeah.
158 million in the cost-sharing agreement, but what I'm trying to get a connection between the cost-sharing agreement numbers and what we're told that it costs 193.5 million to deliver only part of what was promised in the cost-sharing agreement. The cost-sharing agreement seems awfully under budget. Was it a figure plucked from thin air?
So the cost-share agreement was based on the recovery plan. So the recovery plan was in 2012 and the cost-sharing agreement in 2013. The recovery plan had the performing
But the recovery
arts.
plan is the blueprint.
The blueprints within the recovery plan,
yeah.
So the blueprint had the performing arts precinct in the block south of Armagh, which had one building which contains the Music Centre of Christchurch and the Court Theatre. And then the block north of Armagh had a 1,500-seat auditorium and the CSO. So that was what the basis numbers of those blueprint were. In terms of where those numbers came from, that was done by Sarah rather than by council.
But seriously, within what, less than a year, it doesn't sound right to me that the number would have been presented at 158 million when just to build 2 of these components of the blueprint was 193.5.
So during the LTP submissions, Creative New Zealand representative articulated a figure of round, I think his initial comment was 5,500 per seat. I think he actually meant 55,000 per seat. And that probably translates to a figure that would fit in the $157 million envelope.
But that's only for the 2 components of what was a bigger set of proposals.
Yeah, so $55,000 a seat times 2,000, it's a fraction over $120 million for what was proposed in the blueprint. Now, my position is that the benchmarking studies that we've done with key auditoria designer around the world suggest that $55,000 a seat isn't going to cut it, and that realistically for what the city needs, it's a $93,000 a seat expenditure. So you could say that the figures included in the blueprint were light.
So we are going to explore this as we go through it, but I guess I wanted to stop on this picture because I think there's been an assumption in the media and certainly in the public arena that the cost of repairing the town hall is significantly greater than what you would get from developing the blueprint option, and we're hearing the complete opposite now.
That's correct.
Right, thank you. Carry on.
Okay. So the implications of there are implications of the options on the insurance payout that the council receive. The insurance payout is structured into 2 components. There's the indemnity insurance of $32 million, and there's the insurance contribution to repair of circa $37 million, giving a total figure of approximately $69 million. So, if we do nothing, council receives $32 million. End of story. we get the indemnity payout, nothing further. If we build new, we get $32 million. We get the indemnity payout and nothing further.
I think you should repeat that because, again, that's another area of misconception and misunderstanding.
Yep.
That if we build brand new, the council receives the indemnity. We don't receive the full insured cost.
That's correct.
Thank you.
If we repair the auditorium and foyer only, we receive $53 million, comprising $32 million of indemnity and $21 million of contribution to the insurance payout. We don't receive the full insurance payout.
But on top of that, we would have to pay for the demolition of the rest.
Correct.
Right.
Similarly, if we repair the auditorium, foyer and James Hay, we get $62 million. There's a rebate on the repair insurance for the Limes room and Boaters, and we still have to pay for demolishing those.
Mm-hmm.
And if we repair the whole facility, we receive $69 million from insurance, the full payout.
Were we underinsured?
It would appear so.
Thank you.
So, the key measure, and everybody has been very focused on headline numbers, particularly the 127 million. But what's more important probably is to actually understand what the cost to council is of each option, because that then takes into account the rebating effects of insurance. So if we do nothing, council will receive $19 million because it's had to pay $12 million to maintain the building up till now and then demolish it. Similarly, if we build new, the cost to council will be $166 million. That's essentially the headline cost of $193 million less the $32 million of insurance.
And that's not counting other obligations under the cost share?
That's correct.
It's just straight out replacing the town hall?
That's correct.
Okay.
If we repair the auditorium and foyer, the cost to council is $39 million. The cost, that's on the next slide. And then if we repair the auditorium, foyer and James Hay, the cost to council is $47 million. And if we do a full repair of the town hall, the cost to council and therefore ratepayers is $58.6 million. On the screen behind you is really an analysis of all of the options, looking at some key metrics. The leftmost coloured column is the cost to council, and that's just what we've worked through. The next column to the right, entitled NPV Changes in Revenue over 20 years, recognises the loss of revenue to the council or VBase as its facilities operator as venues are taken away. So option one, the top one, is the baseline. That's full repair of the town hall. And VBase's revenue discounted over 20 years is about $35 million over that period. If we go with option four...
Just for further. If you want the detail and you want to read the detail, it's on page 107 of your agenda.
Yep.
Sorry.
That's okay. Option four, which is repairing the town hall and a new single-storey Limes complex, results in a revenue loss of $1.4 million. Option five, which is repair of the auditorium, foyer and James Hay, and the demolition of the Limes, Boaters and Cambridge room, results in a revenue loss over 20 years of $13.6 million. And option six, which repairs the auditorium, foyer, and demolishes the James Hay, Limes and Boaters and Cambridge, results in a loss in revenue of $29.2 million over 20 years. A new build on a new site results in a loss of $1.4 million over the 20-year period. That's the impact of the options on the revenue side of the equation. We've also looked at in terms of the right-hand coloured columns, the impact on resource management risk. And clearly, retention of the building as it stands, 100% repair, is a low RMA risk. In fact, we now have the resource consent for the project. Demolition of various parts of the building start to increase the RMA risk because we're dealing with a heritage listed building here, where we get to the point where the options where we're demolishing James Hay, Limes, Boaters, so on, we're getting into high risk RMA territory, notified consents and appeals to the Environment Court. So I've put that in there just to give you some context around RMA risk in relation to the project. So really there's a couple of questions that Council needs to ask itself. And the first really is a very strategic question. It's, does the city need fit-for-purpose civic, cultural and performing arts facilities? Clearly, everybody in this room would answer yes. The evidence suggests that there's strong support for a list of well-appointed venues that a city the size of Christchurch would ideally have. Therefore, the do-nothing approach is not an option. The second question that Council needs to ask itself is, should the fit-for-purposes facilities be provided in a new facility? The simple answer is no, we can't afford it, it's too expensive. The third question really is, can the proposed repair and restoration of the Town Hall provide the fit-for-purpose facilities that the city needs? In simple terms, yes. As we heard yesterday, the Lilburn Auditorium is world class. And secondly, we've done some work around the reconfiguration of the James Hay that can deliver on the two other gaps that we've identified, being a mid-sized auditorium for classical music and a mid-sized flat floor contemporary music for 500 to 600 seated people or 1,000 standing. What that's doing is it's actually taking the James Hay out of the theatre space, which is quite rightly now occupied by the magnificent Isaac Theatre Royal, and it's filling a long identified gap for a contemporary and chamber venue. And the work we've had done with the design team has come up with a very elegant solution for that option. So really, in terms of the business case has gone through logically, assessed the strategic needs of the city, assessed the options, and has concluded that the preferred options for providing the venues to Christchurch is to a full repair of the Town Hall, as budgeted, $127.6 million, and that includes the reworking of the James Hay to deliver those facilities. So I think if we do that, we will deliver on the vision that Cantabrians have of a vibrant city, a prosperous city, a city with a very activated performing arts sector, a city that restores its distinctive character, and a city that maintains one of its unique identities. So, any questions?
Numbers, and they're probably because they're not numbers per se, but there is a cost of knocking down a building that is perfectly repairable. That doesn't sort of seem to be taken into account in our city at the moment, and I would really like to explore with you what that cost is. You know, in terms of our objectives with sustainability, the repair of a building, as we had a presentation yesterday. Yep. The greenest building is the one that's already standing. Yep. Perhaps you'd like to reflect on what the cost is of knocking down a building that is perfectly repairable, what that is in terms of our commitments to building a sustainable, you know, sort of clean, green city. That was very much what came through Share an Idea.
That was well articulated by Jessica Halliday yesterday, that the costs of disposal of concrete, of encapsulated carbon into landfill at Cape Valley is significant. Now, that is built into the costs of partial demolition.
Yeah, that's the dollars and cents. I'm not talking about the dollars and cents. You've articulated that really well.
Yeah.
I want to talk about the sustainability measures against which we would want to be a gold standard here in the city.
I think
but we're knocking down buildings that we can save, and we're knocking down buildings that are financially repairable, and we're knocking down buildings that would cost more to replace than the ones we would knock down to repair.
Quite correct. And so, yes, there is a reputational issue for the city around doing what you've just described. There is a specific cost in terms of sustainability, in terms of reuse, in terms of delivery on its strategic objectives. Now, I can't put a dollar figure on any of those, but...
Well, they do try to, and I thought that maybe some work had been done on it, because sometimes you actually need to have some dollars and cents attached to it to make people see sense in the different spelling of the word. Yanni?
I think councillors run an email, because this was exactly the question I asked nearly 2 years ago, and I've got the numbers around the waste going to landfill, the embedded energy and the carbon. So I can tell you what they are. We haven't put a dollar price on those, but we do have the numbers, and it would just be, the next step would be to quantify the financial cost, but it is significant.
Yeah.
So it's 17.5 million of millijoules of energy and 2.5 million of kilograms of carbon of CO2 and 2,000 tonnes of waste.
Yep.
So they're massive numbers.
Yep. Okay, well, I've hogged the thing. Ali, then
Thank you.
Jimmy.
I just wanted to expand or tease out the comments that you made around removing the James Hay from that theatre mix, if you like, as far as size goes, and as that's now been taken up by the ITR. You're obviously looking at that from a facility perspective, from the seating and the amenity and what it provides. What about from a community use perspective? I mean, you're saying that the Theatre Royal will cut that gap for a theatre. Does that necessarily translate to availability for the community as well, and for groups to be able to use from an affordability and accessibility perspective?
Well, I think in terms of what we're proposing for the James Hay, it will have a bigger stage area, it'll have retractable seating. Now, all of that is reasonably straightforward modifications. So the facility will be available in its various forms, and depending on what the community wants and needs. If you go back to the venues matrix, it lists a whole bunch of other venues and amenities, like a rebuilt repertory, like the shed at Addington when the Court Theatre vacates. So by doing what we're doing, we're freeing up space around the town for those various activities.
There's a synergy you need by having those groups as closely co-located as possible as well, so that's got to be part of the consideration.
Yes. Yes.
Thank you.
Jimmy?
Thank you, Mayor. One question regarding to the insurance, the payout, whether has been confirmed with the insurer for those options.
Okay, so the assumptions regarding the insurance payout has been run past the council financial team that are dealing with the insurers, and as of today, that is the current situation. And so that's consistent, that advice has come back from the Chief Financial Officer's office, that is a correct assumption in terms of the insurance.
Thank you.
Oh, I know that Ali had a couple of insurance. Is it insurance?
No, it's not.
Oh, no, well, I'll come back to you after I've gone through these. Tim?
Thank you. Going back to your facilities matrix on 104, A is covered by the Town Hall. C is covered by the Isaac Theatre Royal.
Yep.
D is, of course, covered by the Court Theatre. But with regards to B and E, and that's specifically to the James Hay,
Yep.
Where else in Christchurch is there, I mean, is the proposal to have a fly floor or not? You've talked about retractable seating, you've talked about a larger floor to have up to 1,000, a bigger stage area, but at the moment the James Hale prior to the earthquake could facilitate a number of things.
Yep.
So your in B is specifically for symphonic and chamber music.
Yes. So before the earthquake, the James Hay was frequently criticised for poor acoustics, poor sight lines, and a number of other deficiencies, particularly back of stage handling and things like that. The James Hay wasn't loved, and prior to the earthquake, we were looking at a major renovation program on the James Hay to address some of those issues. Where we're at now is to say, actually, James, and it was a really interesting comment from Hayworth and Tompkins, theatre consultants and designers who were in town a couple of weeks ago with the Court Theatre, and we took them to the James Hay, and their immediate comment was, wow, what a beautiful space for a chamber room, chamber music. And so they worked up some schemes for us around that. So that's where we're heading, where we're going. That's the gap in the market. That's the gap in the current provision, and it's a good fit with a repurposed James Hay.
Can I just follow on?
Yep, they'll follow up.
So I just think if we're going to do that, we're going to miss an opportunity. Is there any way we can, if we're going to revamp and rebuild for the future, then I'd really like to push that and look at that opportunity, because we're not going to, once we've done it, we're not going to be able to do it again. Because, and following on from that, just with regards to both the James Hay and the auditorium, that there was always an issue of load-in for production companies, whether that was New Zealand Ballet, Southern Ballet, whoever that was, there were always issues. So is that specifically being looked at in the information that you're looking at?
Yes, it is.
So in terms of the user groups, so we've had initial contact with most of the users of the James Hay and the auditorium, the town hall, and got some feedback on some of those technical aspects around the loadings. We understand that the requirements, the actual movement forward in terms of the actual fit for the James Hay, we think there's going to be an awful lot more work done in that space as well in terms of user groups to bring that.
And so with going back to the fly floor issue, with regards to if we've only got the Isaac Theatre Royal with a fly floor and the Court Theatre if they have a fly system, what opportunity, say, for Southern Ballet and other, say, smaller, mid-sized touring groups would there be to use a venue in Christchurch? I don't see any.
So just on the screen up there is a section through the James Hay as we... So that's a section through the James Hay as it exists now. You can see that there's a major fly tower structure there. And you can see the stage ends at the orchestra pit there. This is a revised section through it where we actually maintain a small fly tower. We bring the stage forward. We reconfigure the gallery and the stalls and put some acoustic treatment in there so that it works better as a music venue. So the question you're asking is, could the ballet perform in there? Yes, they could, because A, they've got a bigger stage. Typically, they don't have massive sets. They do with minimal sets at the moment. So we do have the facility to drop a simple backstage or back set down through there. What I want to show you is how it might work. So there is the seating in concert symphonic mode.